Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to Act 3 on CHOY 101.7 FM right here in beautiful Nanaimo and all over Vancouver Island. Listen, I am so delighted to have my guest, Judy Stafford, in the Zoom booth with me today. We're going to talk about Cowichan Green and food security and all kinds of amazing stuff. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get started right now. Hey, Judy, I am so happy you're here. Thank you so much for sharing some of your time with me today. Why don't you tell our listeners what is Cowichan Green Community and tell us all about your organization?
Well, thank you, Kathy. I think it's a mutual admiration club that we have going on here because we certainly appreciate you. Um, this idea of an elevator pitch is really challenging for me. So you can tell me when to stop. We're a nonprofit organization formed. We had our 20th anniversary last year, and our focus is food. So that is so broad, but we cover everything from chickens in the backyard to teaching children at our summer camp how to grow tomatoes, all the way up to working with government around policy and action plans and presenting to the federal government about agriculture related initiatives and everything in between.
Well, food security is such an important conversation these days, especially with the economic turns that we've had and the many challenges that we've seen just in being able to get food to certain areas of Vancouver Island as well. But I'm curious about for you, have you seen a real significant change in food security over the last few years?
Definitely. And one of the interesting aspects is 20 years ago, people didn't understand what the word food security meant.
True.
We used to get people calling and saying, "Is it like at the border? I need to, worry about bringing my grapes because of." So it's not as, the word security is something that we were challenged with even continuing to use, but now it's a household
Yes,
couple of words.
absolutely.
Everybody says food security. So we've definitely, since COVID, seen a dramatic change in people's understanding of what that looks like.
Yeah.
And definitely even more recently, and I hate to say it, in the coming years, about what the economics and access to food really means for people and how challenging it's become. So I would definitely say, in my 17 years with the organization, a dramatic increase. We're seeing folks that access our services that are full-time employed and still can't get food on the table.
Yeah. I think there is a real need to be able to, keep that. I guess I want to call it Maslow's theory, all of it, where you have your foundations in place, the roof over your head, and then, ensuring that you have adequate, culturally appropriate food. Um, so Couch and Green, I know, has a lot of different programs. How about if you share some of the programs with us so our listeners can understand a little bit better?
Sure. We have a lot of direct access to food. So, and honestly, that changed a little bit over COVID. We weren't an emergency food source until COVID, and we started a few programs with the intention it would be short term.
Yeah.
Our initial focus really was education. We feel like the education around food, whether it's growing food, was the most important part. So we do have now a variety of what we call meal programs. So we do Meals on Wheels, for example. We provide meals to a local temporary, which is not temporary anymore, housing shelter, like a housing shelter that was set up during COVID. And we provide a youth homeless meal program for youth that are on the streets or vulnerable. So those are like direct access meal programs that we operate. We also have a series of meals we provide that are frozen that you can purchase. We have a small grocery store downtown Duncan, and in that store, we offer a variety of programs where people can get free groceries. So the intention in the very beginning was to set up a grocery store that looked like a totally normal grocery store. You can be on one of our programs. You go, you get your shopping basket, you put your produce and items in the basket, you come to the till, and everything's run through. But because you're a coupon participant, it's zeroed out at the end. So there's a lot of dignity. Nobody needs to know that you're receiving any support in that way. And then we also have regular shoppers that come in and just purchase whatever they like. And then, that revenue helps support the folks that can't afford the food as much. So the grocery store also resells and provides the food that we recover. So we work with 6 grocery stores, 3 bakeries, countless growers that we pick up every day the excess food or the food that's not, shelf beautiful. And so far in the last 6 years, we've recovered and redistributed over 1.7 million pounds of food. So all of that food comes into our office, it's sorted. Some of it is obviously not consumable, and we work with farmers who then pick that up. And the rest of it's either put into our kitchen to make the meals that we provide the community or go into our store. And then we have about 20 organizations that also receive the food every day. So that's a huge project that's been going on for quite some time. And we also, in our education component, we have 2 teaching farms. We have a farm right next to a high school, and we've run that farm since we started in 2006 with community gardens. There's about 40 community gardens. We have a demonstration garden. We have a actual viable little farm. It's actually it was funny when the municipality put a sign up on the fence saying, "This is a working farm, be cautious." I just thought, we are a farm. And there's a greenhouse, and we had about 500 youth go through that park last year, just learning about growing food that come over from the university. We had about 200 kids that came to our summer camp that runs there. And so that's a real youth education focus program that we run, that we just love it there. And then we have our real farm. It's 3.5 acres. We have 4 production greenhouses. We have a nursery, plant nursery, native plant nursery. People can come and shop there. We have a farmer's market there. We supply to several local restaurants. We sell that produce online in the online farmers market, Cowichan. And that is going to be the home. The construction has just started. We have a 4,800 square foot warehouse going in right now.
Wow.
We're waiting for our last permit, just submitted today. The envelope, they call it. I'm learning all these construction terms. The envelope will be completed next week. It'll actually have a roof, and you'll be able to lock the door. This has been 6 years in the making of this project. And then we'll start the interior construction, which is a 2,200 square foot commercial processing kitchen, a warehouse, and our offices and training facility. So that's millions of dollar project. Quite overwhelming.
Kidding.
Yeah. And then there's just, like I said, the policy work we do and the advocacy. And it's you know what, I forget some of the projects we do.
Well, it sounds like you have such diversity within your projects. I mean, I've been blessed to know your organization for some time now. I've shopped in your store. I think it is one of the coolest places to shop ever. I didn't only buy food there either. I bought some beautiful First Nation earrings that you had at the back of the store, and I was like, I could come here a lot. Like, this is a really, really great spot.
That's it. Yeah, those earrings were made by a youth that started in a program, a very shy young woman, and was part of one of our youth outreach teams that we formed one time. And she's just blossomed so much. She does so much crafting. She's in craft fairs all over. And what I love is that some of the kids that started at our camp are now interns, and interns turn into staff who turn, it's just the evolution of the people that we start with, and then the relationships you build in one capacity. Maybe they volunteer in one capacity, but then they're, end up doing something over here. It's really wonderful to see that.
I know you've been in your location for the last 17 years, but I am curious, how'd you get started and what made you want to do this work?
I don't know how long your radio show is, but
well, we've got a little time. We're good so far. It's still early.
Wink, wink. I'm old. I am retiring. I actually, without telling the huge long story, I spent 25 years in banking, and I was really good at my job. I did very well. my last job was running the entire training university for CIBC across Canada. I was on
Wow.
the 18th floor at King and Yonge in Toronto. And I remember biking to work. I was such a weirdo then. Biking to work and sitting at the bottom of the elevator crying because I just did not want to go up that elevator. It's for me, it just ended up being soul sucking work. So I ended up moving. I was born in Vancouver originally, but I ended up moving back here because like many people, my parents got ill. And so I thought, I need to come home. So I came back in 2006 and I was doing freelance writing. I don't know how I segued into that, but a friend ran a magazine and said, would you write an article on the West Coast? I said, sure. So I ended up writing for 3 or 4 magazines and I did that for a while. And a friend of mine saw a job advertisement for Cowichan Green Community, and she lived in Waterloo. And so she sent it to me. They wanted some articles written. So I said, oh, I can do that. So I went in and interviewed with this group, and there was 2 of them, the president and 1 staff, in this hilarious tiny office that didn't have a bathroom.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like this ripped kind of chair like a bench seat that you got in the back of a truck. And I was looking around this place going, wow, they had dial up. Okay.
Oh,
It was just hilarious. And but I just love them. And I walked out of there and I thought, I'm not getting this job. Like, they're just going to think I'm ridiculous coming from Toronto. And so anyway, before I got home, I got the call that I got the job. And so I said, okay, great. So long story short, they were folding. The founder had left and he had moved to Ontario. They didn't have any money. And I'd never worked at a nonprofit. And I said, well, how do you run a nonprofit? And they said, well, you have to write a grant. I said, well, I'm a writer. I can do that.
easy.
So I wrote a grant and I didn't get the first one and I was really mad. And then I got a small one. And then I wrote one for about, I'm going to say it was like $80,000. I thought, I'll do that. And I got it. So we ended up hiring a bunch of people with that and setting up an entire environmental conference. It was a 4-day conference. And so it just kept going. And my parents were so upset with me because they said, you can't have a job with, just these 6-month contracts. And so I said, well, I don't know. So 6 months turned into 17 years and
No kidding.
thousands of grants later, here
No
I am.
kidding.
So
Yeah.
that's how I landed there.
When you're supposed to be somewhere, that's how it works out, is that you fall into something you least expect, and then you create such love and joy from that work. And there is a lot of love and joy in your work. The
So
work,
much,
I mean,
so much.
I've
Yeah.
had the privilege of walking around and seeing some of the wonderful things that you do. I it's hard to ask a question like, what's your favorite component of it? Because I'll bet it's all very, very whatever. But in the 17 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot. So what does that look like for you? Like, where was it in the additional buildings? Was it putting out the pizza program? Was it doing the kitchen renovation and being able to feed so many people? Like, what area of it did you find the most fulfilling, and be the most challenging to grow?
Well, I always say, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done
Right?
it.
Right?
There's several times that was a lot of questions in a question, but I think I have to say, seeing firsthand on the ground the impact
Yeah.
of all the people we touch, and it's so broad.
Yeah.
From the kids that go home and yell at their parents because they water their tomatoes incorrectly, to people coming in the store literally bursting in tears saying if they didn't have this program, they wouldn't eat today.
Yeah.
But also seeing shifts around the political table. We presented at our regional district last night. Once a year we do a road show and we do a video of the year. And it's completely impossible to do our year in review, in one video, and it has to be under 10 minutes. So this year it was 9 minutes and 32 seconds.
Ooh, just about to the wire.
We only get 10 minutes for a delegation. So, we presented our video last night or yesterday afternoon, sorry, and 2 people who are area directors for the Cowichan Valley Regional District were crying. You know, just from seeing, I'm getting goosebumps right now. I was tearing up because we're a little organization in a little tiny town of Duncan. 5,000 people live in Duncan officially. And, you know, anywhere from like 20 to 30 to 40 staff we have are all so passionate about the work and the reach. We do a terrible job of collecting our statistics. Even in our video, even today I did another presentation at North Cowichan and I said, oh, that program that I said we did 30,782 meals last year, I totally forgot about a completely other program that does 7,000 meals a year. So
Wow.
that 30,000 is actually like I lost 7,000. Like it's just like I
1,000 is a lot. I mean, that's a lot.
That's a program
Wow.
we forgot to count that program because it's run so well and it's all volunteer driven and they just do their thing and we just support them with food and all the admin and stuff. So I think that it's on the ground. It's on the ground. You know, when I was a banker, I didn't have people coming in my office, you know, bursting into tears that they got to have a dozen eggs that day from us. You know, I had people coming in yelling at me because the interest rate just went up on their mortgage. So that's not soul work. It's important work. You know, it's very important work, but it's not soul, you know,
not filling your cup.
Yeah. So really that's what's kept me going. We've had some extraordinarily hard times, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
We've faced financial just dismay many times. And my commitment was I will never lay off anyone. And even through COVID, we never laid off anyone. We worked harder than ever during COVID. And so it again, what's kept me going to buying a $1 million building downtown Duncan was an absolute nightmare, and the renovations and the permits and the delays and the cost overruns. But we provided housing for people, 20 people. There's 20 units upstairs, and literally people crying when they get to move into a new beautiful space. And the impact of the housing is just I can't even tell you how, housing is, we all know, but to see firsthand, a young woman of 18 getting her first place and aging out of care, having nowhere to go, finding a place. We provided much more than housing, even though we're not in the housing business, nor are we a supportive housing organization. I remember one of our interns was living upstairs and she said, I have a fever. Can anyone just check on me? And I'll keep my door locked, and we would go up and check on her. And, I have a million stories like that. So it's that connection with people. That's what I would have to say. 100%.
Well, and I see that. I see the impact on it. And I mean, I recognize that our listeners on CHLY 101.7 FM are unable to see your face the way I get to see your beauty. But of course, they all know because they listen to the program that you can find the show again on YouTube and all that. And I'll talk about that more later. But my joy for you is that you've taken, something that, was about to close. It was going to end, and you've built on it and built on it and built on it. I think that housing is very much a part of that continuum of care. I think that, really we all need a roof over our head, good food in our stomachs, the ability to get the basic necessities in check so that we can move on to the next levels of our life. And so I think that, whether you're not in the housing business or not, the fact that you've been able to really show 20 people for however long they're living in that unit or those units, that security is incredible.
Yeah.
Where does the drive come from?
I think I come from a long line of workaholics. And
workaholics.
I'm sure you know a few.
I do, one or two.
Yeah, and which is not necessarily a good thing. I wasn't really shown boundaries when I was growing up. So, I'm not saying that this is a good way to operate. There's certainly been a lot of burnout, but I like a dog with a bone. You know, I don't give up. I remember one time at the regional district when I was asking for money, which I've done several times. The mayor came up to me after and said, "You know what? We're going to give you the money because honestly, we like he wasn't saying in a mean way. It's like, okay, you need to go now." Like,
Yeah, you're in here all the time. You got to push those buttons. And I think that's important for our listeners to understand. Getting money for nonprofit organizations is very hard. And you
very
do have to push and push and push and push and push. And so I think that's probably
yeah.
a fact because you're not a pushy person. You're a lovely person with a
I'm persistent. I'm
and you're
persistent,
consistent.
and I don't take no for an answer. I remember the very first grant I got from what's called Island Health now, it used to
Yeah.
be VHOP. I got a grant from them, and it was less than what I asked for. I called them, and I said, "Excuse me, I asked for this much, and you only gave. You can't do that." But I didn't know, so ignorance was bliss in the beginning.
Yeah.
And they ended up giving me more. But, you know, they couldn't believe the audacity that I would call them and insist on, you know, and when I was preparing for the meeting yesterday, I went back to see how many times have I asked the regional district for money.
Just
And
so,
I had written them a letter in 2009 asking for $72,000.
wow.
2009, we probably had 6 staff. We had maybe 4 programs. I mean, I only asked for 80 last year. So to ask for like that much money, I didn't know,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that kind of ignorance audacity was just like enough to people say, well, I guess we should give her money.
Well, and the understanding is that it's going to the recipients. It's going to the people. It's not, I think people have got, there's a disconnect sometimes, I think, that people think that all of these wonderful things in the way of programming just happen. They
Mhm.
don't. You know, it's a lot of volunteers, a lot of, vim and vigor, a lot of push, a lot of asking, a lot of grants, a lot of all of that. But to see the social enterprise of the
Mhm.
store being able to kind of flip things around and give you the ability to expand even further. I mean, that's pretty rich. It is really great.
And we heard this term social enterprise about 12 years ago, and it was a very new term, and none of us could define it. And
Mhm.
CRA still hasn't figured it out after all this time.
Very true.
But it's yeah, but it's the idea of a nonprofit being able to generate income that
Yeah,
then gets rolled back into their programming. I mean, it's brilliant and it's not rocket science, but it is complicated for the CRA. But you know, for us, we kind of, you know, intuitively, I thought that's the only way we're going to make it. At one point, I think we had 6 social enterprises. We had a landscaping company. We had our building and generating revenue from our building with our rentals, our store, our farm map, our magazine. All of these things were initiated to, you know, partially be cost recovery. Some of them is just cost recovery so that you can get a grant to start something. But if you can generate enough money to just keep it going, that's our farm map. It's in its 15th year. It was only funded once.
yeah.
And now it pays for itself every year, 15 years, by ad revenue. And, you know, it's not an expensive map to produce, but it's so well loved. And we keep thinking, do people really want a paper map in these? And they do.
They
And
do.
you know, we run out of them every year. We should print more, but it's outrageously expensive. So the idea of having some additional revenue generation when as an organization, we have zero core funding from the government. We don't have contribution agreements from a ministry. So all of our money is either fundraised, fee for service, or donations or grants, right? So we realized very quickly that you can't be grant reliant and be successful. Interestingly enough, another organization I was talking to has one of these magical contribution agreements, which I, you know, dreamed of having and salivate. And I think how easy it is. You just renew every 5 years. Well, when you have all your eggs in one basket and
Yeah,
there's a change in the political will out there and they decide that sector is no longer valuable, their contribution got sliced in half and she had to let a whole bunch of staff go. And I've thought to myself, wow, aren't we lucky that our eggs are in, you know, 100 baskets? And if one basket goes down, I still have 99. And that's how we've managed to survive and flourish is because of that.
Well, and I also think that Cowichan Valley has its own unique way of working as a team. Like the
Mhm.
agencies leverage on each other. If one organization, not necessarily financially, but the ability to shape and shift so that you can meet the needs of the current, climate or the current situation as we know it. And speaking of that current situation, because, I think you and I know a number of people that are working in the field of the unhoused population. And I'm curious if you've seen a real dynamic shift in what that looks like from hampers from you or from being able to utilize the services and supports. Have you seen an increase of the unhoused people coming to get help?
Oh, definitely, 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 definitely. So one of the programs we have is the cob oven, which, I was as I'm retiring and actually training my successor, I realized that I come at things what some people would say is backwards. So the city came to us and said, we have this pizza oven in a park and it unutilized all through COVID. It's disrepair. Will you take it on? I said no. I'm not.
Understandably so. It didn't sound very attractive.
But anyway, they persisted.
Good.
And I finally said yes. And so, was there money to do this? No. Did I know what kind of program we were going to run? No. Did the city, who is an extremely valuable partner to us, and we had done quite a number of projects with them over the years, whether it was a solar days or an anti-idling campaign to the urban forest strategy, like we did a whole bunch of projects. My relationship with the city is extremely important to me because they also navigated us through buying and renovating this building. Our permits, we know they went out of their way. They discounted fees. So that relationship to me was the important one. So they came to me and said, listen, we need you to take this cob oven. We put it out for an RFP. Nobody took it.
Yeah.
So I did try and say no, but I said yes. And then I figured out what to do. It was a struggle for a little while. And then I actually found a very sympathetic funder. And we came up with this idea of doing a youth outreach project there. We know there's so many youth couch surfing on the street, on at risk of being on the street, very vulnerable. The increase in our young folks who are really struggling has just broken my heart.
Mm.
So we thought, okay, it's pizza. It's a pizza oven. Who wants pizza? Kids. Okay, let's do a youth project there. Let's get kids to gather. We're going to give them delicious pizza. It's a really cool oven. It's a cool place to hang out. The park is beautiful, has a splash park. It's very well used. We set up community gardens there years ago. It's a very busy park. So if we get the kids to come out and have pizza, and then we say, by the way, here's some information about where to get a job. Here's some information on where to go for some health services. Here's somewhere to go if you need housing. So we came up with this sort of random idea, and we're in year 3 now coming up. We're expanding the program this year because the demand is increased so much,
Huge.
and the
Yeah.
impact. I would say if I had, I know the food recovery is the biggest, but if I had to say and I'm not, I hope the other folks that work for CGC don't hear this because I don't want them to think their programs aren't valued. This one is my heart. I was there a couple of weeks ago. The sun had come out. It was cold, but it didn't matter. They had the little heaters on. It was a beautiful blue sky.
Mm.
And the youth that come there and um, just connect and chat and hang out and eat. And the program manager is so welcoming and soft and gentle. And I noticed this, but you know um did you know that I have a bin over there that has shampoo, and
Yeah.
you can just help yourself. And so there's no stigma. They're not asking for things, they're being offered things. And she spends the whole time just listening for cues. Wow, I really feel like I'm interested in firefighting. There's so many fires. I wonder what that looks like. Within 2 minutes, she had someone come over from the Work BC, sat with the kids, talked to them about it, and 2 of those folks went out and got their training and are fighting fires.
Wow.
So they,
Wow. No,
right? Like I'm,
halt. I have to stop and breathe that out. Really? Oh my God, that's incredible.
yeah, I have goosebumps. I have
I do
goosebumps.
too. I do too. I hope our listeners do also. Yeah.
So, this is direct impact that we're seeing right in front of our very eyes because the city begged me to take on a pizza oven. But if I'd have taken the approach that there's no funding and we can't manage this facility, and if I'd have stuck to my guns, they were going to rip it down. It was going to cost $20,000 to rip it down, and they were going to do that. And instead, I was just like, I don't know, like it's crazy. Like everyone said, don't do it, and there's no money. There's no money. But we found the money, right? The money comes if the intention is so clear and the passion is there, and there's impact. The money always comes, and it's actually happening right now. It's Thursday afternoon, and the youth will all be there, and it's a beautiful day. And I'm just so inspired about the transition we've seen with some of the youth that were hanging out there, even a couple of years ago to now, like really, really finding their place in the world.
I think we all hear the common, when people are young, that's when we want to make sure we support them in every way. Quite often that isn't the case. That's absolutely the opposite of what's happening. The program, I had the privilege of seeing the program. I think I was there in the spring of last year, so it has been a while. I hate to say it, but it's been a minute since
But
I've.
you have to come back.
Oh, I intend to. You bet I will. I definitely keep my ears to the grind and I hear the incredible work you're doing. But while I was there, the WC person came. There were a few people that were sitting around the table and it was truly such a beautiful opportunity. It was so relaxing. And yet they were getting the supports and the help that they needed. And I think that is, a win-win. I'm glad that they didn't take it down. I'm glad that you found the money to make it work. But more importantly, I'm glad that you had the vision to sort of step outside the coloring and like get over those lines and think of something creative to do that. And I'm curious because of that. It sounds like for the last 17 years, you're finding and removing obstacles wherever possible. Do you have mentors that you reach to get the support that you need in order to facilitate some of those ideas?
Oh, I mean, it takes a village. I
Yeah, right.
definitely have been inspired. And that's an interesting word, mentor, because I think I have a lot. This morning, Thursday morning,
I
I have
should tell
coffee.
I should tell people that it's actually Monday afternoon, but we're recording this on Thursday just because we
Uh,
can connect this way and it's over Zoom, so it makes it easier. But
uh,
that's to our listeners, they're probably going, "What do you mean it's
what do you
Thursday?
mean it's
Monday.
Thursday? What?
It's Monday.
Already?
It's 1 o'clock."
Friday tomorrow?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry to make
Sorry to
you.
interrupt you. Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to put
No, I
times
love
on
it. It's all
there. I
good.
hadn't thought of that, but Thursday morning I have coffee with this 92-year-old farmer. And he always calls me, says, Judy, I've got it. What's going on? And his hearing's going, so I have to talk really loud in the coffee shop. And he repeats himself, and it's just wonderful. And his wife calls me and thanks me because that's one of his reasons for getting out of bed is to go have coffee with Judy. And he's just one of those guys. You could tell he was such a player, not a player, but oh, I love that sweater you're
Charismatic
wearing.
and yeah, yeah.
At 92, he still has it. He has mentored me so much. He was the reason we got that farm that now is the farm and food hub that we're building a 4,800 square foot warehouse on. That was him. He said to me, Judy, there's this property. I think you should try and get it. And this was in 2015. And it took us 2 years, but we got the property in 2017. He had the vision. He said, we need an urban teaching farm right here on this piece of property. You need to get this. And we lobbied hard with the municipality and we got it. So I just love him. A previous mayor of Duncan, Phil Kent, he came to my office in 2011 and said, we need to do a food recovery program here. And we talked about that for years, and I wrote 8 grants, and it took until 2018 before we could get any upkeep on uptake on that. And he was a complete inspiration for that project. So it goes from politicians to farmers to there's so many people that have blazed the trail.
Mhm.
We're not doing new work. There's been food charitable organizations since the 70s, and And I think there's a saying like you stand on the back of
Yeah.
hundreds of people before you, and we definitely have done that. And the food recovery, one of the things that was really challenging was to get through the legal paperwork and the contracts with giant Sobeys, right?
Wow.
And we struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled to get through that. But another organization managed to get through all that. And I called them up and I said, we're starting the same thing and we can't get through this stuff. And he goes, oh, that's great. I'm going to give you all my contacts and here's our contracts. And
Wow.
so, when you talk about people sharing, on the couch and working well together, that's the kind of stuff that really makes the communities, right? Because they could have said, oh, we don't know, we're not sharing that with you. And we could have struggled for another 5 years to get through all the litigation components of it. So they willingly shared all of that with us, which allowed us to do this amazing program. So every time I look around, I think of, I just have fallen in love with so many people that have unknowingly, probably some of them, mentored me. So that's a really interesting to think about.
I appreciate where you're coming from. It's true. It is a village and it takes a lot of people to sort of come together that have been there before. Um, but I also think that it takes a person like yourself to be able to not only take that information, but run with it, build on it, create something more, ask questions, look for solutions, go and bang on doors. Like all of those things are really, really important. And, some of our listeners are rather young. They're coming out of university and they are, trying to figure out where their way is in the world. And so I think it's really important that we share some of these pieces of wisdom for people to kind of get them to wrap their head around like this work. It can be a work of love and faith and gumption and all of those things, and recognize that there's always room to continue to move the dial forward. I'm going to take just a quick second to do a very brief station identification here, because I wanted people to go get a piece of paper and a pen so that they can reach out, find out what your website is, explore a little bit more about some of the things that you do, and be able to, learn a little bit more about Cowichan Green Community Foundation. So if you have just tuned in, thanks for tuning in to CHOY 101.7 FM. We are delighted that you have joined us and glad that you follow us on our YouTube station, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. That's also pretty fantastic. We do also appreciate that you check into to Rogers Cable 4. Act 3 produces one program once a month. However, it's seen 4 times a day, Vancouver Island wide. So we do invite you to watch us there and listen to some of our guests and, ask the questions that need to be asked. In the Zoom booth with me, I have Judy Stafford. I called her a different name earlier, not at the beginning. We fixed it. But, but I felt like we just, got to bring it back to real here. There's a lot of really great work that's being done. And I'm really glad that Judy is our guest today from Cowichan Green. Judy, I'm hoping people go and grab their paper and pen because in a few minutes I'm going to ask you to share how people can find you. But I'm also curious, that we know that for Cowichan as a whole and in the housing continuum, we're seeing a lot more seniors that are that are struggling. We've talked quite a bit about youth programs. I'm curious, have you seen or are you noticing a real uptick in the amount of food hampers or food services or food requests that are happening in the Cowichan Valley? And what does that look like for you? How are you able to support them?
I really wish that the answer was no. And it breaks my heart to think that at retirement age and beyond, that part of folks' lives aren't less stressful. They've put in the time, they've done the work, they build the buildings, and they've laid the infrastructure and the roads and all of those things that allow us to be here. And it breaks my heart again to feel like they're worried about paying their electricity bill or feeding themselves. And that is not an exaggeration. We do see that every day. With our some of our food programs, we consistently run wait lists. We have about 100 folks, which equates to 354 folks who are served a month with one of our food programs, because it's one applicant, but they could have a spouse or children. And the majority of applications we're seeing now are seniors. I believe the statistics I saw the other day as I was writing a grant was something like 1 in 8 seniors is food insecure. And that's just a crime. That's a real reflection of how we're failing as a society. At this point in their lives, they should just have it easy. And it's almost harder because perhaps when they were younger, they had full-time jobs and the cost of living was much, you could buy a house for 30, 40, 50,000. And, the rental costs and all of that is just out of reach. And so we're seeing more and more children and seniors accessing the food bank. And all I can say is like, shame on us, really. And we have to do something differently, like CPP and OAS and all of those government income sources for seniors haven't increased. And you're taxed on your CPP, which is a crime. That's money you put in. And it's
And you've
taxed.
already been taxed on it
Like
before you even got to take a look at it. It's already out of your gross. Yeah, for sure.
So how did that pass?
Yeah.
Who, anyone, they didn't ask me, obviously, but so yeah, I think it's not like, you can pinpoint one demographic and say that's the demographic we need to focus on. So that's why the breadth of who we serve is so wide. We've got children that aren't eating and we've got seniors that aren't eating. So unfortunately, we're doing our best to help all of them.
Well, I think you're doing a really and wonderful job. And I'm sorry that there are wait lists. That breaks my heart as well. I know that it is a common conversation. What did you notice it more during COVID where you were seeing that, or less, or was it, has it been since post-COVID that we're starting to see those radical changes or the radical amounts, or what do you think it might be that's really, shifted that narrative from being we're reasonable, we're okay to, oh my God, I have to choose.
Exactly. Well, I think, it's one of these things I think that caught up with us, right? Like I think there was a steady incline. I'm not saying 2019 people were doing well.
No, no.
I always said, wouldn't it be great if we just closed and we folded because everybody was fed well,
Absolutely.
That's my dream, that we wouldn't need to exist. I don't need to work. I could happily retire.
You and
Which
me both. I would love to be able
wouldn't
to
that be
say
great
that.
if we, of
Not
course,
really true in my world, but there's a bit of work left to do before I get to sit with my grandkids for sure. But
but yeah, just, get to a point where you've actually worked yourself out of a
yeah,
job would be brilliant.
yeah.
But, definitely COVID exacerbated everything, especially around food, because the food access became such a huge issue, right? And the food production and the supply chains all got messed up, and you couldn't go to the grocery store, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when we started our short-term emergency coupon programs. It was in 2020. As I said, we weren't doing that before COVID, and it was only supposed to be 6 months, right? We got quite a significant amount of funding from the federal government and the provincial government to support people with food access. So not to sound too facetious, but it was quite extraordinary. I was like getting calls all the time. Here's $50,000. Here's $100,000. Like, let's get this money to you. They opened up the coffers, and food became very, very high priority for the government, which was great for us. We had capacity. We were ready to go. We'd never closed. Like I said, we hired more people during COVID. We expanded programming. Lots of other organizations shut down. I made a commitment. We did all sorts of weird plans, segregating staff so they were in different locations in case the kitchen team got sick. We had a backup kitchen team. In case the farm team got sick, we had backup farm team. So nobody interacted, but we segregated.
Wow. That's so smart. So smart.
Right? I didn't even know
Yeah.
how smart that
Brilliant.
was at the
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
again, we instituted all these emergency programming with the intention that it was just short. And here we are 5 years later, and we have huge wait lists for programs that were only supposed to run for 6 months. So Absolutely, COVID exasperated things. And also just the cost of living and the housing crisis has continued to increase. It's not like, okay, we came out of COVID, which I'm not even sure what that means anymore.
Neither do
Because I don't know about you, but
yeah, no.
if you get the flu now, you're
I
down for
still
three
check. I
weeks.
check all the time. And you know what? I never actually I'm like you. I worked all the way through COVID. Like there were
Yeah.
you know we were really working to try and help older adults or anybody to get food and get supports and get what they needed while they were at home. What I saw a lot of, and I'm curious about whether you did as well, is a lot of people going to the store and buying canners and starting to do like in a crazy amount of cannon and a crazy. I couldn't buy a bag of soil if I wanted to for a while when you were allowed to go back into the stores. And I was on a wait list for a canner for months, right? Like it was intense how many people were trying to move into the grow your own. And yet, since that, I don't see that happening nearly as much, or at least I don't hear about it. Maybe it's happening, but I don't hear about it. How about you?
Well, if we were on TV right now, you'd see me nodding and laughing, and I'm trying not to laugh too much while you're talking, but you know, there was some upsides to COVID. It was not,
Yes,
and that's hard for people to hear certain things.
so true.
Certain people are still very, very, very affected by COVID, but there was some upswing or upside. I was tickled pink. I at the time I lived in Cobble Hill, which is south of Duncan, in a little kind of little rural area, and I swear there was 10 farm stands in my tiny little neighborhood. Everybody was selling eggs to cauliflower to whatever it was they could grow on their property. And these are not farms, were on the end of the driveway. I loved that. I loved that. People were helping people. People were sharing. People were
Yes,
caring. People were
yes,
looking out. Remember, check on your neighbors. Remember,
yes,
like, and I loved the scent, even though it was such a dichotomy, because on one hand, you weren't allowed to be with people. But on the other hand, it brought people really together. We really were looking out for each other. So I definitely, we had a little saying with a few of us food groups where we were like, wow, our time has come.
yeah,
People now get the word food security. They get how important we are. We've been in the background for all of these decades, slaving away. Nobody understood what we did. And now we're getting money from the government, like hand over fist. People are coming to us. So how do we do this? How do we can, right? I was getting those calls all the time. How do we do this? How do we process? How do we grow this? How do we do? And we're just sitting there going, all right, this is awesome.
yeah.
So I love that people really started homesteading, like in the olden days, and victory gardens and chickens, and people were doing crazy stuff. But you're right, you couldn't get soil, you couldn't get any, it was wild.
Those were the
Um,
things that were disappearing off the shelves faster than fast. And now we go from having, eggs on the corner where you could pick it up with your neighbor. People have gone back to the grocery store and there's like $9, $8, $7 for a
yeah.
dozen eggs. It's insanity at its finest.
We are a funny species.
Mhm.
Things, and I'm guilty of it too, like the convenience, or, we're stressed and we're working hard, and we're commuting to work, and we've got grandkids and kids and stress and
Mhm.
bills. And so, if you were home and you were either working from home because you had to, or you weren't working at all, and you look around, you go, well, I guess I'll go plant something. And well, now you're back to your crazy 10-hour days. So, I would definitely say that we're all creatures of habit. We slip back in. But I still feel like the movement of food and the awareness of the importance of local food, it's a slow creep up, but it's still creeping up 100%.
Yeah.
It's taken a dip, but it's creeping up. And now, with the political scene in the moment, it's, like we were asked to go present today to the local government, re just because people are getting worried about food in a bit of a different way. Yeah, the grocery stores are all still there, but it's the cost now,
Yeah.
and having to shift perhaps our imports and exports. So I think, the tragedy of COVID and the things we learned during COVID are still gonna serve us as we kind of go to this next phase of life of, what's post political tariffs and things. So I you can buy canning supplies in the store very easily now.
Yes, you can. You
And people
can.
probably put them a lot on Facebook Marketplace that bought them during COVID, but that's okay. They still learn things, and it's a skill you never forget. And it might come up again with your own grandkids or whatever, and you dig out the canning supplies from the garage. And once you learn those skills, you've got them forever. And education and knowledge is really powerful. And I think we did a lot of educating during COVID and post COVID, and people are still, we saw we're still seeing an exponential increase when we run workshops now
Yeah.
and our events. So I think it's still very, I think there's still increased awareness, and I think that's half the battle, right?
How can our community help? How can our listeners help? What do you feel that would be in support of this work? Is it changing the narrative? Is it like what might that look like?
Before you finish, this is the trouble. Before you finish your sentence, I had my answer, but then, the first thing is like, honest to God, like we just need to be kinder, like that's
Yeah,
what comes up first of all to me is kindness, because everyone has a story. And you see someone who's struggling or even in the grocery store lineup, and you judge by, what they're putting in their food cart. You just don't know their story, right? So there's so many ways to get involved and help. Small little things, just, pay it forward, or if you know something, or maybe you don't want that counter anymore, well, just give it away,
yeah, for sure. Don't
um,
sit on it. Yeah,
the,
yeah.
and share your knowledge, and, don't get too wound up in all the politics of it all. I'm seeing friends of mine really, really stressed, and there's a couple of them I'm saying, you need to stop and just just recognize what you can do and what you have control over. We have no control over a lot of that stuff, but we
None.
do have control about how we're handling ourselves, and how we're, supporting our own families and friends, and people that are in need. And there's just so many ways you can get involved. I mean, there's hundreds of causes, from hospice to immigration to whatever. But people all need to eat,
Yeah,
so um, volunteering, going and, volunteering in a food bank, or helping in a community capacity. We serve meals three nights a week at a church, and find one of those meal programs and help out, or, offer to cook. Um, and don't waste your food. Like,
yes,
don't, like, we waste 40% of the food we produce.
yeah,
It's not a production problem. It's a waste problem, and it's a distribution problem.
yeah.
So you know what? And I talked to some university students a few weeks back, and I got on a bit of a rampage. And I said to them, stop looking at the best before dates. Like, forget that. I have a family member, won't say who, and I literally stood in the kitchen and ate 2-week-old cottage cheese, and I ate the entire tub, and I said, I will not die from eating this cottage cheese. It is not bad. And they were mortified that I was eating this cottage cheese.
And you
you
know
know
what? I have someone in my life that does the same. As soon as they see the best before rack, and they're no longer allowed near my fridge because they just empty it. And it's like, what you doing? Like if I go away and I have this person look after my house, I know that my fridge is cleaned out when I get home. Which, sometimes is probably not a bad thing if truth be told, but
Oh, truth be told, yeah. Yeah. My stepmom and her mom, oh man, there was stuff that was dated, whoo,
whoo,
centuries ago. But that best before date or expiry dates, those were really marketing ploys, and it's just a crime that I understand around the liability aspects. I understand all of that. And obviously you don't want to eat food and get sick from it. That's just like a no-brainer. But the idea that it's best before, is means that, okay, the day after that, it's 99% going to taste the same. It's about taste, right? And it's about quality and it's about nutrition. Let's just talk like, you don't want to eat something that has zero nutritional value, but you bought it and, to chuck it away is, give it away then.
Yeah.
We take expired food and things like that. And, we deal with it in different ways, but, just the fact that you don't want it anymore, well, just give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, I your trash is someone else's treasure. Is that?
Absolutely true. Well, and there's a whole industry of people that do dumpster diving behind some of the stores in order to
Oh yeah.
find expired food. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation for
Oh yeah.
sure. So listen, you and I have talked for just about an hour here. Okay, if you can believe it, I'm in gobsmacked shock. But mind you,
I could talk all day with you.
I am and I'm not because you and I love when you and I hang out and have conversations because
Me
they're
too.
always so fabulous. But
Aw.
we told our listeners to go get a piece of paper and a pen. So let's tell them how they can find you.
Well, it's the old Google, right? So
Yeah.
It's Cowichan Green Community. If you plug that in, you'll get our website, which I always cringe because it's so out of date. But it has 70% of our content on there. But yeah, the website is probably the easiest way. Our phone number is 250-748-8506. And we're right downtown Duncan. 360 Duncan Street is our main headquarters at the moment. So yeah, it's pretty easy to find us.
Yeah, it's not hard at all. And there's you can check them out at the pizza oven at the park and go to the website. You'll get all kinds of information. It's absolutely fabulous. We've got about 1 minute left, unfortunately, before I have to say goodbye to our audience. So I thought I would just ask my favorite question of all, which is if you could, and you shared a lot of wisdom today, in fairness, some really good stuff. What's your takeaway? What would you want people to understand or know about your experiences in this work and certainly in the experiences of Cowichan Green and food security or food care?
That's almost a trick question, but honestly, I think it has to be relationships.
Yeah.
We've worked really hard to build those and keep showing up, even if they say no. It's an important relationship. You have to keep showing up. To have two political people sit in a room and cry when you talk about the impact of your work, that's because we kept showing up and building those relationships over all that time. So, and even when the players change, if you're there and you're consistent and you keep showing up, I think that is how you're going to be able to make the impact and raise the money and attract the people. You need capacity and you need the passion. And I think that just comes from time and persistence. So I think I used more than one word, but relationships is the most important thing.
Yeah,
100%.
you could use 20 million words and I would be grateful. Like I love what you just said. It's the core root, I think, for absolutely everything is to have a really, really great relationship with the community and the people around you. Thank you so much for being my guest today on Act Three. I have had such a lovely conversation with you. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as well. And I'm going to see you soon. I can't wait to give you a hug and say hello and go check out things that are going on in Cowichan Green. Do you want to pop out that website one more time and pop out the phone number one more time before we close out?
Sure. It's cowichangreencommunity.org. And our phone number is 250-748-8506.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Judy. It was a pleasure to have you in the booth. I am really, really excited about our listeners trying some of the ideas that you have and not throwing their food away so darn quickly. Have yourself an absolutely wonderful day. We'll talk again real soon. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to Act Three. We'll see you next time. Enjoy your day. Bye for now.